to wrap up this trip to India and Pakistan. My first visit to both countries as Secretary of State. We'll be meeting with Prime Minister Modi here in just a little bit, and very much looking forward to that. His leadership, along with that of President Trump, have truly put the relationship between India and the United States on a good plane with an upward trajectory. My meetings were all productive with each of the counterparts, and here in India, I must say, the kickoff of the 2+2 was pretty special, historic, a level of relationship that the two countries have not previously had. And I think each of us valued the opportunity to have good, strong, candid discussions. We've had 70 years of diplomatic relationships with India, and it was important for the four of us to work together through this dialogue so that we can continue to keep these two relationships both intertwined and moving towards our set of shared objectives as the world's two largest democracies. We're happy that we were able to announce two agreements with India, the Kamkasa Agreement, and we also agreed to enhance our military cooperation with India as our major defense partner. In Pakistan yesterday, we agreed that it's time to start delivering on our joint commitments. There was broad agreement between myself, Foreign Minister Qureshi, and Prime Minister Khan that we need to take steps that will deliver outcomes on the ground, allowing us to begin to build confidence and trust between our two countries. I've also had fun. On both stops, I've had the chance to meet with teams from our embassy. Always the highlight of my trip to meet with our diplomats and our locally employed staff to deliver on President Trump's foreign policy priorities. And with that, I'm happy to take a couple questions.
If I can start with North Korea, sir, there are new reports today that Kim Jong-un is saying a declaration ending the Korean War would not lead to withdrawal of U.S. troops in South Korea. Do you see this as a concession, and does denuclearization need to come before an end-of-war declaration? And finally, are there any plans to meet with the North Koreans at the UNGA?
So, as I've said consistently, as we've been continuing to work with the North Koreans to deliver on the world's demands, the UN Security Council resolutions, which demand a number of things from North Korea and from no one else. There's only one country that has commitment under those Security Council resolutions. As I've said before, I'm not going to talk about ongoing negotiations, discussions that we're having with the North Koreans. We will continue to work with them to deliver for the world as against the UN Security Council resolutions, and for Chairman Kim to deliver on the commitment that he made to President Trump in Singapore now back on June 12th.
Mr. Secretary, I'm sure you've heard the story that's gripping Washington right now is this anonymous op-ed in the New York Times. Were you the author of that op-ed? Could you comment on it? Thank you.
So it shouldn't surprise attacked this administration relentlessly, chose to print such a piece. And if that piece is true, if it's accurate, if it's actually, I think they described it as a senior administration official, they should not well have chosen to take a disgruntled, deceptive, bad actor's word for anything and put it in their newspaper. It's sad more than anything else that our nation's come to where you have, if it is what it is purported to be, it is sad that you have someone who would make that choice. I come from a place where if you're not in a position to execute the commander's intent, you have a singular option. It is to leave. And this person instead, according to the New York Times, chose not only to stay, but to undermine what President Trump and this administration are trying to do. And I have to tell you, I find the media's efforts in this regard to undermine this administration incredibly disturbing. And I'll answer your other question directly, because I know someone will say, gosh, he didn't answer the question. It's not mine. take the second one first. We have told the Indians consistently, as we have told every nation, that on November 4th, the sanctions with respect to Iranian crude oil will be enforced, and that we will consider waivers where appropriate, but that is our expectation that the purchases of Iranian crude oil will go to zero from every country, or sanctions will be imposed. So we'll work with the Indians. We committed that we would do that. Many countries are in a place where it takes a little bit of time to unwind, and we'll work with them, I'm sure, to find an outcome that makes sense. And from whence they purchase the other crude oil, we're happy to see if it's American products that are able to deliver for them. I think that'd be a great outcome. But our mission set is to make sure that Iran doesn't engage in malign behavior with wealth that comes from countries around the world. Thus the purpose of the sanctions. North Korea, no, I'm not going to talk about the negotiations or what the next steps might be. It is the case that there is still an enormous amount of work to do. We haven't had any nuclear tests. We haven't had any missile tests, which we consider a good thing. But the work of convincing Chairman Kim to make the strategic shift that we've talked about for a brighter future for the people of North Korea continues.
Last question, and it's Joanna Slater from the Washington Post. Hi, Secretary Pompeo.
Hi.
Can I ask you about two other areas of friction with India? Sorry, it's one question.
Be clever. Make it A and B, and it'll all work.
The first is the S-400. Is the president inclined to grant a waiver for that purchase? And the second is on trade. Has the U.S. in fact made demands of India for certain purchases, increasing its purchases of U.S. goods over 3 years? And your personal relationship with Foreign Minister Swaraj. I'd like to know about that.
I haven't known her for a long time. I met her in person for the first time today, but we've spoken by phone previously. We have a good discussion, one that is marked by true candor. I think we both share our concerns in places where we think our two countries can work together to do better and create opportunity as well. With respect to the S-400, no decision's been made. We are working to impose CATSA Section 231 in a way that is appropriate and lawful, and to exercise that waiver authority only where it makes sense. And we as a team, the national security team, will work on that. And as we continue to have these conversations with India about that, I think come to an outcome that makes sense for each of our two countries. Third one, trade. Trade, very straightforward. Free, fair, and reciprocal. We want the trade balance, the trade deficit that the United States has in its trade with India to be rectified. They've made some progress on that, and we thank them for that. They're going to buy more energy products from the United States. They're going to purchase more aircraft from the United States. We truly do appreciate that. But the gap will remain, and so we are urging them to do all that they can to narrow that gap. And at the same time, it's important that the trade barriers that are there, places that American companies and American workers' products can't be sold here, be reduced. And so very consistent what President Trump is seeking all around the world are the things we talked about with our Indian counterparts here today. Great. Thanks, everybody. Go ahead. I'll take one more. You look very forlorn.
I just wanted to clarify on S-400 is the idea that the Indians are so far down the track with S-400 that it's not reasonable really to sanction it because they're kind of in no way out of situation.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that. There's been no decision made. But I will share that we do understand the history, right, of India's relationship with Russia and legacy systems. Our effort here, too, is not to penalize great strategic partners like India, a major defense partner. The sanctions aren't intended to adversely impact countries like India. They are intended to be have an impact on the sanctioned country, which is Russia. And so we'll work our way through the waiver decision as the days and weeks proceed, and we'll do that alongside our partner India as well. Great. Thanks, everybody.